This is the Parents in Sport podcast. Amazing guests, honest conversations, topics that matter.
Welcome to the Parents in Sport podcast. I am your host, Gordon MacLelland, and I am joined today by sports parent, coach and head of golf education at Leadbitter Kids Golf, Gavin Grenville-Wood. Gavin, thank you for joining us on the show.
Pleasure, Gordon. Happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Fantastic. So how's life been treating you during these strange times?
It's been busier than ever. But of course, I've got my two boys in the house, aged 22 and 18. And it's been an interesting 8 weeks now. Are we 8 weeks or 9 weeks? Either way. And I've seen them morph into slightly different human beings at the end than they were at the start, which is very interesting. Very interesting.
Has it been good having them back around, or
yeah,
has
it's been great.
Its challenges?
No, not really any challenges as such. You know, Josh at 22, he's been travelling for the last 2.5 years or so. So it's nice to have him home, but. Yeah, it's interesting, you know, when he got back from Asia mid-March, he wasn't very well and highlighted a few deficiencies in his performance and his overall health. So the first couple of weeks were spent, you know, monging out, as he described it. And then the last 6 weeks have been total hardcore commitment to a change in physiology, I would say. Body shape, body composition, mental focus, and it's been good to see. Of course, the downside is, Gordon, it's cost me an absolute fortune in building out the home gym. So, you know, when the Amazon man comes and he delivers, you know, six dumbbell weights, each of 20 kilos, you know, him struggling to get them off the back of the truck. This little Polish guy that drives the Amazon van, God bless him. He's like, holy mackerel, what are you having delivered today? Yeah. I'm like, well, you know, it's the home gym, my friend, and that's the way it is. So, so let's see you tomorrow.
Real life stories, aren't they? And no doubt that your food bills will have gone up as well, because I know that many of us know when we have our children at home and we're feeding them 3 times a day that those bills go through the roof.
You know, you just don't understand. You know, your kids are younger than mine, but when Josh now prepares his lunch, we are talking full-on steak almost every lunchtime. It's full-on protein, and it's just hilarious. When I see him cooking, I'm like, oh dear. It's just great to watch.
Yeah, fantastic. Now today's episode, we're talking about sports parenting today, and obviously you've mentioned Josh a couple of times. So, you know, Josh, obviously Gavin's son, is a professional golfer. Josh has a world ranking at the moment. I think last time I looked, Gavin, about 1100th in the world, something around that?
Yeah, something like that. I've not checked recently to see what's happened, but it was round about that. Yes.
Yeah.
So had a pretty good year last year. So got on the ranking. It's not easy to get ranked because you have to first of all play in ranking events, but pretty much you've got to finish in the top 3 of these events that he's playing in to score any ranking points. So yeah, it's good. It doesn't mean a whole lot. Doesn't necessarily get you into other tournaments at this point. Only when you get into the top 50 does it really matter.
Okay.
So yeah.
So Josh is a professional golfer. He's got a world ranking, and obviously, his journey started a long time ago for you, and obviously your sports parenting journey started a long time ago. So how's it been? Just give us a sort of, I guess, a little overview of the last sort of 15, 20 years, and just little snapshots of what it's been like.
We don't have enough time, Gordon.
That's why I said snapshots, Gavin. Just little glimpses.
Snapshot. I don't do snapshots. I do detail and ramble. I ramble. Okay. Highlight of my sports parenting. 2006, Savannah, Georgia, United States. doing my UEFA D license in football coaching, and being videoed coaching football, that was life-changing in every sense for me as a parent and as a professional coach. So obviously I coach golf as well. But watching me coaching football in front of a classroom of 25, 30 other people was enlightening and scary and horrifying in the worst sense that you could ever imagine. And I was never taught really how to coach. I don't know if you were. Coaching philosophies didn't really exist in the mid 90s. That's when I became fully qualified with the PGA, and certainly from a parenting standpoint, never had any tips or advice. You kind of figured it out, and I think as parents and even as coaches, we often adopt some of the mannerisms and some of the language that we associate with coaches that coached us or teachers that taught us when we were at school. And so that's been very interesting. And I noticed that in a lot of people that I work with. But, that was a landmark moment in 2006. And it's been a journey really since then with both kids. Ethan's 18. But it's trying to allow them to take responsibility for the pathway or the journey that they're on, and for me to try and help and guide and support that every step of the way. Now, it hasn't been a perfect journey since 2006. Lots of mistakes made from all of us, but at least we've been able to acknowledge where the mistakes are. I'm perfectly happy to put my hand up and apologize to either of the kids if I get it wrong. And I think it creates really healthy discussion when you do that. So it's been positive.
I think you hit a really good point there when we talk about the fact that there's no such thing as a perfect sports parent. I mean, it just doesn't exist. And I've spoken to you about this obviously off the show, that even if we live and breathe in this particular field and we understand what we should be trying to do or what might be healthy, there are actually some days in our own contexts and our own environments where everything just goes totally out of the window. And I think that my gut feeling on where I am with it at the moment is that I'm aware of a lot of the things that I should be doing. Can I apply them all the time? Well, I try to, but no, it doesn't always happen. But I am pleased to some extent that I now feel there's a bit of support out there, or there's some information and some help. Because as you say, back in the 90s, even with coaching or parenting, there was nowhere to really go. You're right with coaching. I mean, I read some of the coaching things now, and I'm very relieved on Twitter that a lot of the things that I've done purely by chance and working it out myself are actually deemed to be all right. I mean, they've been made very complex now, and people have got titles for them. But I'm really pleased that actually, I'm glad I worked that out when I'd started.
It's like the research that has been done now validates the way that we figured things out.
Yeah.
And the way that we kind of do things now, which is great to see. And, that fills you with immense belief, doesn't it, when you're coaching or teaching young people, certainly. And I think a lot of my career, I've struggled with self-belief over what I've been coaching, because you look at some coaches and some people, they do have maybe fancy titles or have conceived various perspectives on certain methods for certain parts of the game, and you feel like you've missed out, or you feel like you're inferior, but actually, it's nothing of the sort. Coaching itself is so much about communicating and building relationships with your students. Quite often we get lost in the technical content, which is largely a load of nonsense. So the parenting thing's really interesting, because there were only really ever parenting books for dealing with kids up to like 6 months old, weren't there? You had your antenatal code book, which the missus read, and I stayed clear of. And then you just figure things out from, stopping Josh getting out of his bedroom by propping a 7-iron under the door handle of his bedroom so he couldn't open the door handle. I'm sorry if anyone finds that like it's child abuse, but we had to keep the little bugger in his bedroom. No other way of doing it. And it was the moment we got rid of his baby bed, and which had sides to it, which he used to climb out of anyway. And we gave him a big boy's bed. And then he just felt like, hey, I can just do whatever I want. I'm going to get up now. And it was like, no, you're not getting up because the door is locked with a 7-iron propped under the handle.
Brilliant. Well, do you know what? Isn't that good to see that basically your sports parenting or pushing your children into sport started with the use of the 7-iron to lock the door. So that was good. That was a sign of things to come.
It was perfect. Yes.
Just going back to what you said there about social media and inferiority and comparisons with others and self-doubt. I mean, I think, we were talking about it there from a coaching perspective, but I think one thing that I know a lot of parents, when you talk to them and you go out and do our work, really struggle with is the world of social media. And I think a lot of sports parents feel judged all the time. They often stand there watching. They worry if they're doing a particularly good job. They feel like that if their children get something wrong, that they're being judged on their ability as a parent. They're under far more scrutiny, and it's really tough now for them in the social media world for parents, because we look at media and all we see are the highlights reel of everybody else, and we assume that everybody else's life's brilliant and every other kid's brilliant, and we want our children to be brilliant. It's tough now, isn't it?
It's really competitive, Gordon. Both the boys played football up to their early teens and then fell out of love with it because of how it evolved. And both of them never felt like they were included. They were quite good players. Josh especially was a pretty good footballer, but standing on the sideline, I got caught up in it. You get caught up in the competitiveness of what's going on. I'd learned by that point, we're talking, probably 2010 through to 2012. But I'd learned at that point not to shout on the sideline or to offer any technical advice, but to simply praise and, offer encouragement. But, it got very competitive, and there's an element of social status, I think, from parents on the sideline with how well their child is playing football. And if their child is, perceived to be the best on the team, then those parents are stood as proud as peacocks on the sideline. Nothing can touch them. And it's really interesting to see the dynamic. And, you'll get certain splinters of parents just sort of filtering off to one side when they feel a little more inferior, perhaps. And then you'll get the aggressive one that feels like his kids played out of position or unfairly judged, and constantly challenging the coaches and the referees and even other parents and worst of all, other kids. So it was a very interesting journey, that was, and not an environment I particularly liked, I must say.
Yeah, it's very challenging, parents around competition and around events with the children, and it's almost like there's a competition on the pitch, but then there's also a competition, on the sideline, as you say. And again, I think more can probably be done at the beginning of the sports journeys and the environments in these clubs that we create, because what you said at the very beginning of the podcast about basing what we do based on our own life experiences or things that we perceive to be right. I think as a parent, if you haven't got a sporting background and you get your child, let's say, involved in football, I think you conform to what is already happening because, you know, humans want to conform. So if we turn up at a football environment and that's where people are massively competitive and people are yelling at the other team and people are yelling at officials, I think you can easily get sucked into that, even if you don't necessarily believe it's right.
Isn't that what is perceived as normal?
Yeah, possibly, and I think that the bit around you know, where you say you learn not to yell the tactical instruction, which we know from a coaching point of view is not a good thing to be doing. A lot of parents think they're helping their children because parents just want to help their child, and they think.
I love it when parents are on the sideline and all you hear is kick it, prove it. Yeah, it's like, good Lord.
Yeah, it is. But I think they sort of feel that, again, in their sort of competition, that they want their child to feel that they're supporting them. And we know the best way of supporting them is to sort of positively encourage, give good feedback at the right time, and have really good conversations with them. And it isn't yelling the next instruction.
Of course, parents underestimate the power of just actually being there and watching.
Yeah.
You know, more than any nonsense that comes out of their mouths.
Yeah.
You know, on the sideline, it's just being there offers so much encouragement for the kids. I used to when I was at boarding school for quite a long time growing up, and my dad always used to come and watch me when he was in the country. More often than not, he'd always come and watch, especially cricket. He loved his cricket, but I always used to play better when I knew he was watching. And he was never vocal, never said a word, but he was just sat there, you know, in his blazer, shirt and tie, and just watching. And I just used to get such a thrill out of him just being there. And he never once on the sideline ever said anything to me. And that was just perfect.
Yeah.
And kids love that. Kids love their parents watching. Yeah. And certainly from a coaching perspective now, you know, I've brought the parents in to allow them to do that, to watch and observe and to be part of the team. But, you know, that was quite advanced really for my dad back in the 80s, just stood there, you know, just not saying anything. And, you know, then, you know, it's like, well, what do you say, you know, when the game is over? It's like, did you have fun? Did you enjoy yourself? You know, you don't need to talk about other stuff. Just make sure that the kids enjoy them.
Yeah, I mean, my dad, it's funny, isn't it? My dad was very similar to yours, that I don't remember. He was odd, though, because he didn't say a lot, but he never really said well done either. And it's a tricky dynamic, that, as a parent, isn't it? Now, you know, I still remember, you know, his upbringing was very much of the line of, well, we'll go and play squash and you'll get beat 9-0, 9-0, 9-0 until you're good enough to actually sort the job out. Now, what he did to me was, the day I was 2-0 up at the age of 12, having battled for 5 years to do it, he then left the court with a knee injury, never to reappear back on the court ever. So now says that he's never been beat me at that particular game, which I think is an extreme end of a parenting approach. But he was odd because he, as you say, I loved the fact that he was there, but he never criticised, but he never said well done either. So it was always a quite a funny one for me. And I look at my own parenting now with my own, and I always make sure that, you know, I'm saying well done and encouraging, but I also give far more feedback than he ever did.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the feedback for me has to revolve around a conversation that I think is inspired from my kids. I don't want to lead the conversation off. You can kind of steer it a little bit, you know, when you start off by saying, oh, did you have fun? Did you enjoy yourself? How you feeling? And then a conversation can start, but there's no point in having a conversation if they don't want to have a conversation. But you know, it's about picking your moment, isn't it? And having, you know, the right time and the right place to evaluate, because evaluation is obviously important. And golf is a good one. Certainly playing with the kids. And I just played with the boys this morning. We had a nice round of golf at 6:30 this morning. Brilliant. Beautiful out there, actually. But you know, trying to coach in the moment, or trying to understand what they're feeling in the moment of competition or in the moment of the activity is quite important, for their own development, to recognize certain feelings and thought processes. But once when the kids are actually in a competition, sometimes the best time to evaluate is the day after, when everyone's had a chance to cool off, and in the cold light of day, just look at some of the basics, the facts.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about asking great questions and what that looks like, and the timing of those questions, as you say, are really, really important. But I think what's also important is, for different families and different children, those questions and those environments can be very different. Everybody has got their own unique context based on their family history and the way things have been, and you can give ideas out there, but what works for one, as you say, may not work for another, perhaps. And I think what we've got to be aware of as parents is having an idea of what works for us, what some of those great questions may be, but also, like you say, when do we actually ask them? And often, we choose to have those conversations after the heat of battle. And there can be no worse time. And actually, we need to be dropping them in subtly during the course of the week without them even realising. And then we get a far better response then.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, it also has to complement what the coaches are saying. Yep. And if you're not engaged with the coach, it's very difficult to really truly back up, what's being talked about. So, yeah, it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one, but I think golf is such a technical sport in many ways, but it's also a sport where development happens over a long period of time as well. So, one practice isn't going to define the golfer. Neither is one tournament. Yeah. So it's just understanding the big messages, really, and making sure that as the parent you're involved in that process and not alienated from it. So it does mean that as the parent you have to have built a relationship with the coach, which probably needs to have been fostered from the coach themselves, as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah, and that's a challenging one there, and good to see that you've got that in there, because I know we've done some work together, with Ledbetter Golf around that the coach has got a major responsibility in that, because actually, if parents are listening to this show and thinking about, well, yeah, no, I'd love to have a relationship with my coach, there's an awful lot that don't. There's a lot that do, but there's a lot that very much it's us one way and the parents are the other, and hopefully our work in coach education is certainly helping to change that perspective, that we do need to be part of a team, and the coaches have got a role, and the parents have got a role. I mean, I often get asked, well, whose side you on? Well, actually, I'm on everybody's side, because I get it from a coach perspective, but I also get it from a parental perspective. And actually, if we're really honest, I think all of us have got a bit of shifting to do, a bit of a change, whether we're a parent or a coach, and it's just being prepared to work through that together. And as you say, hopefully years from now, there'll be a lot more healthier relationships between parents, coaches, and children.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's one of my motivations over the next few years now, is to break down these barriers between coaches and parents. I talk about the three-legged stool, where the coach, the parent, and the kid all need to be aligned, so that the stool still functions as a three-legged stool. Of course, if one of the legs is a dodgy length, then the stool collapses, much like the kid's involvement in the sport. That's the metaphor of the three-legged stool. Yeah. So it's really, really important. And I think parents equally, we need to coach parents through this as well. We need to coach coaches through this. We need to coach the kids through this. It's a fairly new policy and approach, isn't it, to complementing a child's development. But
Yeah.
it's, when you think about it, it's a massive, massive piece of the jigsaw. And, you know, whether we like it or not as coaches, parents will always have the most influence over their children. And whether we like it or not as parents, we always will have the most influence over our children. Yeah. So it's accepting that responsibility and those facts, and actually dealing with it in a positive way that benefits the children.
Yeah.
And why would we be having our children engaged in a sport if it wasn't for the kids' benefit? If it's for anything other than the kids' benefit, it is 100% the wrong reason why the kids are taking part. And you'll see that in terms of drop-off.
Yeah, you can see. Yeah, you see it all the time, don't you? Where it's been led by the adult. There's nothing really being driven by the child, and then the moment they get other things to do, they'll pick something else.
Yeah, a really good friends of ours, actually, their 8-year-old is in the Olympic development program. For which sport? Can you guess which sport I'm talking about? She's 8.
Gymnastics?
She's in the United States Olympic development squad.
Gymnastics?
Gymnastics. Yeah. Oh. Gymnastics. Now,
yes.
Well, not really, because it's fairly obvious. Come on.
I'll take that. I'll take that as an answer. Are you sure that wasn't the £1 million question?
Oh dear, Gordon. Yeah, you're experienced enough to know that answer. But you know, I've gone back and forth with her, and I do have to. I've got one particular caveat with this, and you know, we look at single sport specialisation, which is another different topic, which we do need to have a conversation about. But when you're looking at gymnastics, they tap out of the sport very early, don't they? So 23, 24 years old might be the top end age for these youngsters, and ideally they're looking to peak probably between 15 to 19, I would guess. So that's why gymnastics is so hardcore, really, at such a young age. You know, she's doing she's doing gymnastics now. I think it's probably between 12 and 16 hours a week after school.
Okay.
And it's massively impacting her life, and it is her life. Yeah. And it's just a great question as to whether this is a healthy course of action for the benefit of the child, and for the development of the child as a human being. I mean,
yeah, you know,
I've got questions.
No, I mean, I think you could, as you say, you could spend a whole sort of afternoon of discussion around that, because it brings in so many different elements. I've just made a mental note of that, because I've got Scott Hahn, MBE, coming on the podcast. Now, Scott is Max Whitlock's coach, and Scott runs one of the most successful gymnastics programs down in Essex, and he's coming on the podcast to talk about parental engagement and what they do, and he's got some fascinating views. So I might try and throw that question into Scott and see where that goes, because I know he's got some pretty strong opinions about a few things, and that's what I'm hoping this show will do, is that people, you know, there's nothing wrong with people having their opinions based on their experience, and there isn't always a right and wrong. But I think putting that information out there and being able to discuss it healthily is really important. So listen, back to your bit as a sports parent, you know, so if you had to tell me, looking back over the whole bit, what's been the best bits for you? If you reflected on it now, what's been the best bits of the sporting journey, parenting journey?
The best bit is where we are now, where I know that we've got a great relationship between the three of us, and it will last forever. Fantastic. That's the result. That's the result of it, and nothing else matters. You know, I want both my kids to be successful. Of course we do. But whatever that looks like, I don't really care. We have a great relationship, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, and I think the fact that you, as you say, you were out having your morning 3 ball at 6:30 this morning is a very sort of positive sign to that. So that's brilliant. So obviously that's the best bit now, and you've had time to reflect. What's during any point in the journey, what was really tough? What's been really tough to take as a parent, not as a coach? Take the coach's hat off. As a parent, when have you found it most challenging or most difficult with both children? Because obviously we've talked a bit more about Josh.
It's been when I've felt that there have been external factors influencing the journey or influencing their development, and that's just normal growing up, doing stupid things as teenagers do, girls, alcohol, all these things that have the opportunity to influence or to deviate the direction that you thought the kids were on. Do you know what I mean? Whereas, you have to factor in that, kids are going to meet other kids of the opposite sex, right? They're going to want to hook up, for want of a better expression. They're going to want to try alcohol and have a few drinks here and there, and they're going to do stupid things, and they're going to get into trouble. And I think it's really important that you understand that is part of the journey. You have to account for that coming up at some point in your kid's future. So, you're with your kids. I mean, I'm not suggesting they're going to become alcoholics or you're going to become a granddad anytime soon, but you know what I'm saying, right? It's just that there are things that are going to happen that it's just part and parcel of how kids grow up and how they learn how to become adults, right?
Yeah.
And we did it. I mean, I had an episode with Martini at the age of 15.
Yeah.
And, it wasn't a particularly great experience in the end, but I learned my lesson.
Yeah.
And you learn it the hard way. And as kids have to learn lessons the hard way. But, that's part of normal growing up. And that will, it won't necessarily change the ultimate direction that the kids are going in, but there'll be bumps in the road and they become really challenging. And you start as a parent to falsely question what the kids are doing rather than accepting that, okay, I knew this was going to come up. So, I'm going to just let it ride. I'm not going to push the progress, their sporting journey or anything like that. I'm not going to push that too hard at this point. I'm going to let them experience teenagerism and just try to give them some life advice. And, I think for me now, coaching, if I just put my coach's hat on just for a second, we've got to coach the person first, and parenting, you've got to coach the kid first, not the sport. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah.
So, life skills, implementing good life skills and understanding how to deal with certain situations so that sport might not come into it when you're having these issues. And I think it's important that you don't force it. And I probably overstepped the mark on a couple of occasions. There's no question about it, but I needn't have been worried. And you needn't be worried as a parent. Kids will revert back to it. As soon as they start to figure a few things out, they'll see, right, okay, yeah, and I really need to just get my head back down now and start to move forward. So
yeah, some really good points in there. I think that we know it's an uncontrollable, isn't it? As a parent, we do works on controllables and uncontrollables with parents in workshops, and one of the uncontrollables is you can't really control which peer group they fall into, which often leads to a lot of this is you can't really control their friends. So if they get into the wrong crowd, or they get, as you say, they get into the drinking, or they get girlfriends and things change, which is as you say, a normal part of growing up. It's a real shock watching our children go through that phase from everything just rolling along nicely to, as you say, these external influences that just weren't a factor. And I guess...
And it can happen quite young, can't it? And it can often take you by surprise. And that's what catches you out, I think, as a parent. when it's like, oh wow, I just didn't realize my kids were that old at this point. I thought they were still kids. And it will often be something really quite defining, quite momentous, not necessarily in a good way, but it'll be a real defining kind of moment that they'll do something completely out of character, that you've got to really become a solid parent. Forget the sports bit, but you've got to become a solid parent and have the kids understand that it's a learning process, and these are some of the pitfalls that you can fall into, and just to make sure they deal with it appropriately. Let's not forget that they're going through puberty, and their emotions are completely out of whack, and they're not necessarily normal at that point, and we just have to cope with that.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. And I think there'll be a few very grateful parents here. We know when parents have gone away and asked some of the questions we've talked about, and said, they've come back to me and said, Gordon, we tried some of those questions and we were just greeted with a grunt. And then we talk about the timing, or we maybe have to try again, because we can often get that, and it's certainly a challenging phase. Now, you've obviously evolved with your coaching over the years, because obviously we've had discussions around coaching and other bits. Have you evolved your approach with your sports parenting as you've gone on? Do you have a very different view now on how you maybe started in those early days of grassroots football and the start of golf?
Yeah, no question. I mean, I was a golf coach before I was a parent, of course. Always thought I was quite good at teaching kids, until this moment with doing my UEFA license, and I wasn't. I mean, they're different sports completely, and I know I wasn't as I was in golf as I was in football. So I know they were different, but I'm a lot more relaxed now, a lot more hands off, and both as a coach and as a parent, and just trying to let things sink in before I start making judgments on things, or before I say things. I'll just let things just travel along a little bit further. And I like to see how things evolve, because quite often they sort themselves out. And I love it. I love it when a kid that I coach, or one of my kids, figures out the solution for themselves. It's brilliant, that. And if you create the right environment, as a coach or a parent, then you will allow that kind of natural creativity to evolve, and you'll allow failure to happen, and you will allow the kids room to figure things out for themselves, and you won't worry about it. And you'll be comfortable with failure. And I think that's one of the big things for parents is just accepting that failure is part of the journey. And if I was to wish for one thing in my younger years with my kids, it would be preparing for that. Preparing for the down moments, the troughs, in a way that I could say, right, there you go. I knew that bit was coming. Right, let's deal with this positively, rather than digging ourselves deeper into the hole. And every single parent that watches this, Gordon, needs to understand that their child is not special in terms of being immune from failure. Every single kid will go through it. You will go through it as a parent. It rips your heart out, makes you want to throw up. It makes you feel sick sometimes with the severity of the failure or the moment that it happens. I remember Josh playing in a tournament in Texas, particularly challenging conditions over 3 days, and he was leading after 10 holes of the final round, big tournament, and boom, takes a 9 on the 11th hole, and my heart sank. Not a lot I could say at the moment, because it was competition. Just felt sick. Heart felt like it had been cut in half. But what I witnessed over the final 6 holes was just special, very spectacular. And it was just like, it was watching a kid who'd had his heart ripped out, who was feeling sick, but had dug so deep. He fought back, didn't win, but he fought back and really made a great account of himself. And those lessons are far more valuable than if he wouldn't have had that failure and that mistake, because, that one round, that one hole didn't define him, right? The round that he plays tomorrow doesn't define him, doesn't define who he's going to be, because we're looking so much further into the future. So I'm so thankful for these moments of failure now. I almost embrace it when they do come along. And we had failure earlier, as late as September last year, just on the golf course at European Tour Q School, but learned so much from it. And you take steps forward. It's one step back, 3 steps forward when that happens. So that would be it, really, and in not so quick of a nutshell.
Yeah, but what a sort of an amazing way to sort of start tying up the show. Such a very real and personal moment. Thanks for sharing that, because I think there were so many good messages in there to as parents to focus on. The character development of our children are far more important than the sporting bit. The sporting element will take care of itself if those other traits are in place.
If I might add, if parents that are watching, listening to this, should feel like they've won the lottery, because if there's one thing that I wish I'd have had, 13, 14 years ago, it would have been advice like this. I wish I'd have had the tools and the knowledge and the understanding of what lay ahead. But what we're giving to parents right now is like a mock journey. It's like saying, you're going to experience these things and we can help you deal with it. We've got some strategies and initiatives that we can help you through this process. You're not alone. Whereas I felt very much alone. And it was tough. But, we figured it out. I wonder where we'd be had I had all of these resources now that we're providing for parents. So, if I'm listening to this, watching this as a parent, I should feel really, really fortunate, lucky that I can engage with something like this.
Yeah, brilliant. No, thanks, Gavin. That's fantastic. So the final part of this then, so your final question, in a nutshell, in a Gavin nutshell, this is your 3 top tips for any new or current sports parents, if you had to give out 3 to really think about. I'm guessing your failure one's in there.
Well, that's going to be number 1. Expect and embrace failure. Number 2, make sure your kids are playing their sport because they enjoy playing their sport. And number 3, there's so many, Gordon, there's so many. I'm going to say, don't evaluate every single performance. Don't feel like you've got to comment on every single action. Let the kids inspire the conversation.
Brilliant, fantastic. That's a real nutshell from you. That was a great effort. That was less than a minute. You did well there. That was superb. Gavin, listen, thank you for joining us. Another stunning episode on the Parents in Sport podcast. Look forward to catching up with you soon. Thank you for being on the show.
Brilliant. Thanks, Gordon.
Thank you for listening. Check us out at parentsinsport.co.uk.